Gonna give, looks like Nick needs one more minute to get in. And Sarah too, right? Sarah. Looks like Nick needs one. There's Nick. Perfect. Great, the time is now 7 o'clock, so I would like to welcome everyone to the Scarborough Public Schools Board of Education meeting for this evening. Today is Thursday, April 15th, 2021. Could I have the attendance, please?
Sure. Mrs. Giftis?
Here.
Dr. Gill?
Here.
Ms. Castellanos?
Here.
Ms. Layton?
Here.
Mrs. Lindstrom?
Here.
Mrs. Seither?
Here.
Mrs. Turner?
Here.
Mr. Bennett?
Here.
And Ms. Giftis?
Here.
Perfect. Everyone, please join me for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Amen.
Agenda item 4.0 is adjustments to the agenda. Are there any adjustments this evening? Seeing none. Agenda item 5.0 is public comment on agenda items. Just go through the spiel one more time here every week. I will ask that members of the public who wish to speak to agenda items, please raise your little blue hand. If you click on your own name, you should have the option to raise hand. Each speaker will have 3 minutes, and I will be using my phone to time you. I will mute myself, and when the timer goes off, I will unmute, and you'll kind of get that blast of music, and that lets you know that your time is up. So if you could please wrap up when you do hear the music, that's appreciated. Please direct your comments to me, the chair. State your name and your address for us when you begin. We have 5 public comments that we received via email that Kelly Johnson will be reading for us. I will go ahead and let Kelly start. Kelly, if you want to do 3, and then I will call on members of the public who are in attendance.
Okay. This first email is from, and I apologize, Elise Charello, and she says, "Good evening. Ahead of tonight's meeting, I would like to submit a question and comment. With the announcement of New Hampshire being directed for 5 full days of in-person learning by April 19th, and Massachusetts doing the same, it is evident that our neighboring states agree that full days in person is the best for our children academically and emotionally. When does the board plan on putting their agenda for return in the fall? Parents are very eagerly awaiting this information for planning purposes. Additionally, as the second dose of the vaccine is likely on the horizon for our educators, does the superintendent plan to reach out to the Department of Education or the governor's office requesting ways to work around the 3-foot guidelines the way other neighboring districts like Bonnie Eagle have? It'd be very nice to see our school district fight for our children's education. Scarborough resident, mother of 3. Shut my phone off, sorry. This next email is from Allison Neeland of 19 Jermico Mill Road. Dear School Board, thank you for including fall school reopening on your agenda today. It is critical that we start immediately planning for a 5-day-a-week in-person school schedule. I hope that this conversation will be ongoing throughout all remaining school board meetings. I have read through most of Biddeford School District's 69-page comprehensive plan for reopening, and am impressed by their thoroughness. I look forward to seeing an equally detailed plan from Scarborough in the near future. And if you haven't already, I encourage you to use Biddeford's plan as a model. I'm also encouraged to hear that Cape Elizabeth and Falmouth have found creative solutions to opening this spring. If they can do it, so can Scarborough. As you consider the 21-22 calendar, I urge you not to fall into the trap of seeing student in-school time and professional development for teachers as being mutually exclusive. We do not have to shorten school days for kids in order to provide robust opportunities for training and collaboration for teachers. I've had the unique opportunity of living and teaching around the world, and I've seen many successful schedules that allow teachers to have substantial planning and professional development time. Scarborough was the first place we've lived where the district asks kids, and therefore families, to sacrifice in order for teachers to have planning time. As a parent of 3 school-age kids, I'm more than happy to be part of a working group to develop creative staffing and scheduling solutions so that our teachers can get the planning time they need and our students can get the in-person school time that they need. I request that the school board pressure school administrators to develop a better plan for transitioning kids into the new school year without asking our kids to give up even more of their in-person time. I do not support the plans to phase in instructional time at the beginning of the school, nor the plan to make Wednesday a shortened day. These plans put the burden entirely on families to bear the cost and responsibility of educating children during school hours. Instead, we need to keep kids in school and build a schedule so teachers can get the time they need to be effective in the classroom. This is hard but important work, and I know there are many parents like me who are eager to help develop a plan that serves the needs of our kids and their amazing teachers simultaneously. Sincerely, Allison Nealand. This third email is from Ethan and Sarah McGrain. Dear board members, we will continue to advocate for the full return of in-person learning. We have 3 children in the Scarborough School District, and all have been negatively impacted with this year's hybrid learning. We tuck children in with tears in their eyes, saying they are lonely. They miss their friends, they miss their teacher, they miss their routine. All the districts around us are finding ways to return children to school full-time this school year, and have already outlined their plans to return children this school year, and have already outlined their plans for the fall. Please bring back our children full-time 5 days a week in the fall. Please do not push the start date back to make children miss even more school days. We have so much ground to make up with the loss of education they missed this year. Every day is precious. Thank you for your time, Ethan and Sarah.
Thank you, Kelly. I'm going to go to Mr. Bartlett first, and then Ms. Pine, you will be on deck. Oh, I'm actually not a host. I can't promote.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Hello? Hello?
I can hear you, Brian.
Perfect. Thank you. Hello, this is Brian Bartlett. I'm at 8 Redbrook Lane here in Scarborough. I have 2 children in the Scarborough school system. Both of them are 8-pointers. I found it absolutely appalling at the lack of consistent effort to get the kids back into school full-time in-person learning this school year. It has been incredibly and emotionally taxing for my children being out of the school as much as they have been over the past year plus at this point. Their education has been suffering as a byproduct of the lack of in-person learning. I appreciate all of you looking to get back into school full-time in-person learning next school year. However, our children are struggling now, and they need to be back in school full-time now. I know you have all heard the parents at previous school board meetings about a month ago, with the parents pleading with you on behalf of their kids, and we were completely dismissed because it was difficult. With the new data that you have tonight, I ask that you not only find a way to go back full-time next year, but also this year. When it comes down to additional professional development time next year, we all know our kids have already missed too much in-person instruction and they shouldn't have to miss any more. I can understand needing 1 early release or late start day per month, but beyond that is ridiculous at this point, given how much they've already missed. It is time to get back to school full time. So as fast as possible. Time is of the essence here, guys. Come on. And it's time to do what's the best thing for all of the kids. Let's get back to school full time. Thank you.
Thank you, Brian. Stella, you should be all set.
Okay, good evening, Chair and school board members. So after another week of successes of neighboring school districts figuring out how to increase student classroom time to 4 or even 5 days a week, the frustration in me rises. To have my student denied the same opportunities offered around the state can only be described as inequitable. And it clearly does not put our students as a top priority. The school board has chosen to stay the course in hybrid with the intention of planning for a full-time return in the fall, but we have yet to see any plans. It does not seem unreasonable that we as the stakeholders should receive weekly updates with those plans and progress reports. As we look to the fall, I would ask that you remember your requirement to keep the students as the #1 priority and concern. Students have spent enough time out of the classroom. Transition days for anyone other than perhaps incoming kindergartners are not needed. Students need full days, 5 days a week, starting as early as possible. An alternative to the proposed transition days at the start of the school year may be to reintroduce the August kinder camp with similar options for grades 1 and 2, as to not take away from classroom time at the start of the school year. If anything, we should be decreasing the summer, not increasing, due to the education catch-up needed. So please make choices and find options that give our students the benefits of classroom time a full 5 days a week. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Kelly, I'm going to go back to you.
Okay. This next letter is from Winnie Lee. Dear Chair, thank you everyone for your passion for our children. We know it is a labor of love doing what you do for our children. You have shouldered 2 times, if not 3 times, the amount of workload and have done it so graciously. For us parents, I don't drop my kids off at school because school will fix all of the problems. I bring my kids to school knowing the integral role it will play in the daily life of my family. School is essential. It truly takes a village to raise our children. Most recently, with the implemented half-day Wednesdays, my girls came home so refreshed. They said, Mom, we didn't do our usual schoolwork, but instead we did a lot of fun activities. It filled my bucket because our educators wisely used this brief amount of time to address the SEL needs of our children. Time and time again, everyone has pulled off what is short of a miracle while managing all of the moving pieces behind the scenes. As much as we long for the good old days, I know that it won't be, nor should it remain the same. Our children and their schools have been changed forever. As the landscape of education has evolved, fresh ideas for educating our children can be nurtured. We have seen how relationships and socialization is so integral to learning. I know firsthand how starved of human interaction my children were during this pandemic. Any opportunity for peer interaction did wonders for them. Here we have a big opportunity to think big. We have ESSA grant money and additional federal funding in the pipeline. 20% of this money is earmarked to address learning, loss, and social emotional needs, with the remainder dedicated to reopening our schools full time. The wait and see approach is no longer applicable, as we know we can safely reopen schools. We are now in the minority list of schools that are offering less than 4 days a week. I expect that we not only aggressively plan towards reopening schools with urgency, but do so strategically, beginning with task force selection that is optimistic and solution oriented towards this goal. In the process, we need transparency, as it builds trust and confidence. Without transparency, there's no accountability. This situation demands exceptional leadership and creativity. Thank you, Winnie Lee. This next letter is from Rachel Discall. Dear Superintendent and School Board Committee, I'd like to address the reopening plan for Scarborough schools for the 21-22 school year. We are over a year into this pandemic, and we've seen the absolute devastating consequences for our children not being in school full time. The mental health consequences have been nearly catastrophic. The current COVID response by the school district has led to social isolation and has caused our children to have suicidal ideation, increased substance abuse, PTSD, depression, anxiety, and the list goes on. The student dropout rate has increased. Our children have had decreased learning, decreased math scores. We're destroying our children. I urge you to please use the next data that we have learned over the last year to resume normal activities and schedules that support our children with education, health, social emotional well-being, and psychological stability. Please look at states that have had their children in full-time and other surrounding main towns to support a safe plan for Scarborough. Our children deserve more. They continue to remain a low-risk group, have had low hospitalizations, and there have been no child deaths to children in the state of Maine to date. Regards, Rachel Disco.
Thank you, Kelly.
I believe that's the last one I have.
Okay, thank you. I think so too. Mr. Fertile, I'm going to promote you, and then Mrs. Ladd, you will be next.
Can you hear me now?
We can hear you.
All right. First off, thank you all to the school council. I know we've had quite the interesting year. I'm just kind of getting into everything now. And I'd resigned myself to the fact that we were going to have the hybrid model for the remainder of this year. I would love to see us go full time. I don't know if we have the plans and the organization right now in place for that. But again, I am endorsing that. I do have I guess my biggest fear would be in the fall, going back to the same situation. From what I can gather, based on what we have for vaccines and now the reduced space requirement of 3 feet, it seems as though that 3 foot limiting factor is all I can really put my finger on that would prevent us from going full, back to normal, I guess, quote unquote, the 5 days. And I just hope that we're putting all our resources and thoughts and plans into thinking inside, outside the box, or making new boxes, or whatever we can do. Following Biddeford's lead, where they're using outside resources. I have friends in Massachusetts that are all have already started going back 5 days a week. So I feel quite sure that if they can do it, we can find a way to get that 3. I assume the only thing that's holding us back is the 3 foot space, which I understand is a difficult issue. I just hope that's really at the forefront of getting this going. So again, I'm looking hopefully for full 5 days as soon as possible that we logically can. And I hope we're looking at all resources we can to allow for that. I'm glad to hear that some people were really appreciative of that half day Wednesday. I know for some people with childcare who have organized and kind of run around to get as much childcare as they can, I know for some for some people it was more of a hassle than it was an actual benefit. With all the surveys that were happening, I was surprised that wasn't surveyed before it came. I don't think it was. I didn't notice that survey before it came through. Having 1 extra day a month for, it just seemed, to some extent, it seemed more costly and difficult than it was as a benefit. But again, hearing people speak to the benefits of that, I'm very glad to hear that. And my last thought is just knowing that even in this current environment, the days where the kids aren't in school, they're going to daycares, they're having play dates, they're rolling around outside and playing. It's happening. It might not be happening under the watchful eye of the school, but it is happening. So I feel almost in a sense that right now the kids are more at risk joining daycares, getting together, having fun, being kids, which I love to see. And they're not really having widespread reactions to anything. There's no clusters as far as I can tell, and especially the younger groups. My child's at 8 Corners. Sorry, I live in 45 Maple Ave as the introduction. So these kids are gathering in groups on the days they don't have school. It's more or less a free-for-all. People are finding any daycare they can because people are working for the beginning of the school year. A lot of these daycares weren't even wearing masks and there were no outbreaks. Now they've all gone to full masks and they've had great luck with that. So I hope that can go into the equation. again, I know the main thing of the equation is that I think that 3-foot requirement, but I just hope this other peripheral information helps us to understand that we should be trying to push or hope to make, facilitate this as best as possible. That's all. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Jen, you should be all set. And Jen, if you want to unmute, you should be all set.
Great. Can you hear me okay?
You can.
Okay, great. Thank you so much for hearing all of these comments again. In March, I spoke at a meeting and listed a handful of districts who were already opening more fully, hopefully as positive examples, and really hoping that our district could join them. But now here we are, really at the back of the pack, one of a shrinking list of districts left with less than 4 days in person in school. Our staff have done such a tremendous job implementing the half-day Wednesdays that were approved at a prior meeting. And the kids are loving it. I haven't heard from a single child or parent who doesn't say that this has just like been a light in their kids, in their life recently. And so I just really ask with the utmost sincerity that you please empower some of the same staff and the forthcoming building committees to go the rest of the way by voting tonight to let them open their classrooms to the fullest extent that they are able as soon as possible without having to wait for another meeting. I look forward to hearing the details of the rest of the fall plan tonight because I know that there's been a lot of work going on there. But if there are plans for a full in-person return in the fall that assume no change to the current CDC guidelines, it's really hard for me to then imagine how that same plan could not be implemented sooner. And I understand that that might be different at different levels of our schools. But our kids honestly deserve that kind of effort after the efforts that they've put in this year, because it's been really hard for them too. And I believe that you as school board members, that you honestly have the best interests of our kids in your hearts. It's literally your mission as our board members. Anyone that doesn't should simply no longer serve on this board. I also believe that you know that in-person instruction is what's best for our kids. And I believe with those two facts as your guide and the continued hard work and staff that support all of the really good things that are happening in this district, that you will go ahead and make the right choices for our kids, not only for next year, but for the rest of this year too. Thanks.
Thank you very much. Jeremy Dill, I'm going to promote you.
Here we
Jeremy.
go.
Yep,
Can you
there
hear me?
go. We can hear you.
All right, thank you. My name is Jeremy Dill. I'm the father of a first grader at Blue Point School. So I will say that this hybrid learning model is very much most of what she's known for her educational experience. And like a lot of the parents, I certainly echo this desire for them to return full-time in the fall. I know the challenges that returning earlier may present, but I think certainly looking ahead to the fall, I'm hopeful that the opportunity will arise and this will be fulfilled. But I guess I also realize that, my complaints and my concerns are also coming from a place of privilege, and that I think we also got to look at things through a lens of equity. Looking at recent statistics about the Scarborough School District, almost 8% of students in Scarborough schools are on free and reduced lunch programs. So keep in mind that these are households that don't have the same opportunities to have daycare opportunities for their students on their remote learning days. These are households that may not be able to take time off from work to be able to be home with kids on their remote learning. So you also need to look at this as a student welfare issue and as an equity issue, and try and get these children back to school full time so that, these families can have the burden that is remote learning removed from their lives. So thank you so much.
Thank you very much. Is there anyone else in attendance who would like to make a public comment this evening? Mr. Perry.
Hi, good evening. Can you guys hear me okay?
We can hear you.
Great, thank you. Originally, I wasn't going to speak. I guess let me back up. First of all, I have a 3-year-old son and a 6-year-old son who is currently in a part of a homeschool pod. We live over in the Pleasant Hill area. So my older boy would be attending Pleasant Hill, hopefully 5 days a week in the fall. So originally I wasn't going to speak, but something happened to me this morning, actually, ironically, that I would like to share. So around 11:30, I was at a stoplight and I saw a gentleman out there, and I had a brief discussion with him. He was a panhandler in his 40s, and reason why I had a conversation with him, a brief one. He was standing there with his 6-year-old son. So being the father of a 6-year-old, I kind of took that hard. He was out of work. He was homeless. They said they were bouncing around from house to house, staying where they could. I asked him if his boy was in school, and he said no. I didn't really get a chance to go beyond that. But as I did drive off, I played over about 100 scenarios in my head as to what led them to that situation. Regardless of any of those scenarios, the one that stuck with me was that really could have been any parent in Scarborough who has been forced out of work, forced to stay home with their kid, their child, while their school's closed or in hybrid. And let's be honest, hybrid is not the same as open. So while I know and appreciate all the work that's being done by everybody, hybrid for us is not working anymore. I don't feel. So on a positive note, in looking at kind of the meeting agenda and some of the material that went around earlier, I am grateful to see progress being made with the review of the Biddeford plan, with the engagement of Harriman Associates to do some spatial analysis. So that I will say kudos for that. Upon review of these plans and these assessments that are being done, it's absolutely critical that the board be transparent on the steps, the timing, and the costs needed to get our children back to the 5 days a week, or at least the option this year of going back 5 days a week. Again, transparency on the result of these findings and reviews is going to be key. It'll help ease a lot of the stress on parents, teachers, on everybody involved. We have the funds existing and forthcoming. We have the resources, and most of all, we have the community to get behind our kids and our teachers who, as far as I can understand, are contractually obligated to perform in a safe environment. So again, we're asking for a transparent plan for the families to establish the steps or execute on the steps to make that plan happen. I'll leave it at that, and thank you for your time.
Thank you very much. Is there anyone else who would like to make public comment this evening? Seeing none, I'm going to go ahead and close public comment. I'm going to do a little housekeeping here just for a sec. Agenda item 6.0 this evening is the FY22 public hearing on the school proposed budget. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Sandy and Kate.
Hi there. Sorry. I'm having trouble pushing buttons myself this evening. I think Sarah was actually going to start this off for us a little bit and then let me dive into the more detailed bits. Is that what you're thinking, Sarah?
Yeah, sure. I'll just cover off the first slide if you don't mind moving it forward. Cool, thank you. Yeah, so Kate's going to cover the detail. I just wanted to take the opportunity just to kind of set the scene as to where we were, where we are rather. And this is an image that hopefully those of you who are watching have seen before. It was created by the town, but it's been shared in a bunch of different communications. So we want to continue to share it. And really the point of putting this up there at the start is just to try and demonstrate that we're really just at the beginning of this process. It was just last night that the town had their first reading. And so what you're going to see tonight is some details behind what our first reading was. And the town's first reading was a little bit different in that they actually made a passed a motion and an amendment to sort of reduce the budgets for where they came in originally to the tune of about $3.4-ish million. So what you're going to see tonight does not reflect any work that's been done following the motion that was made last night. But that isn't final, and that really just kind of starts the process. So what we hope that folks who are out there watching and listening tonight will do is reach out to us, let us know what's important as we go through this budget process, what we want to make sure remains in, and what's of value to you and your families. So with that, I will hand it over to Kate. And I think we have this image again at the end to put up to sear into your minds when you can stay engaged.
Screenshots. Yeah, we should note that these presentations are posted on our website after each meeting, and there's a ton of budget material on the town and school budget portal. And there's also an appendix slide at the end of this presentation. We didn't want to get too deep into tons of detail, but there is tons of detail out there for anyone who's interested in following along with the budget process and getting more information. And I will just make a pitch right here as your school business manager that none of the things that we want to do in this school district can be done without enough funding. So bear that in mind and support us as we move along. Kelly, could I have the next slide? Thank you. So real quickly, these are the guiding thoughts that we brought into our budget development process this year. Very different from the norm. We built a budget just before the pandemic hit last year, and this year we had the benefit of living through the months of pandemic school, and we had a little bit different focus in our budget. And we wanted to take a look at what had happened in this prior year as we started to think about moving forward and hopefully moving out of the pandemic environment. So what we're looking at was to make sure that we could maintain our current programs and services and stay healthy in school. Big underline on that one. And also talk about coming back into school after having been in the hybrid mode and what kind of needs our students would have that might be different in this new environment. Next slide, Kel. This is a snapshot of the school operating budgets. It doesn't include the capital budget. Again, there are documents posted online which can give you every last little detail of what's out there in our proposal. But what this shows you is the budget that was approved by the school board at first reading on the 15th of March. And as Sarah mentioned, we've gone to the next step where the town council has approved the municipal budget in first reading. And what they have authorized is not what we have put on the table, but that's where the process comes in. We need to work together to figure out how we get to the right endpoint. And if you have memorized that slide that Sarah cautioned you to do, you would have seen that we have a finance committee meeting coming up on the 28th, which will be our next opportunity for the school and the town to work together towards the next steps. So this shows you the general fund operating budget, which is our K-12 budget. That's what you folks vote on. We have our adult education operating budget and our school nutrition budget. An overall increase on expenditures of just under 2.5 million or 5.28%. And then we show the non-tax revenues. That's school subsidy for the most part and a few other small revenue sources. And the net amount is what we are asking for in taxes from the citizens of Scarborough. The tax request for the school department is not the increase to the tax rate. It's simply a portion of the formula that's used to derive the increase in the tax rate. Next, Cal. So again, our focus as we were building the budget, our leadership team pulled together and did their usual budget process, which is very intensive and takes several months. But again, the focus has been really heavily on what is it going to look like in the coming fiscal year, which starts July 1st and takes us through the next school year. What is our life going to be like recovering from COVID, the COVID impacts? And you saw some of the things that I mentioned in the earlier slide. And the other piece that's been really difficult for us is to figure out what kind of enrollment we're going to have next year and how to address the appropriate levels of class size. And of course, the CDC guidance is a big piece of that, the social distancing requirements. And you'll hear an awful lot more about that in the next chunk of this evening. Next slide. What we call level services is basically doing the same things this year and then doing them again next year, with the understanding that children change their grades, that programs come and go. But essentially, level services is maintaining what we currently have. About 80% of our operating budget is in personnel costs, staff salaries and benefits. And the increase in our budget this year, about 74% of the total overall increase in our operating budget is made up of these costs. So bearing in mind that we're a people organization and that we really spend very little money on stuff, other things. And if you are going to be a budget geek with me and get into reading the budget book, you'll see all kinds of cool pie charts in there that tell you where your budget dollars go, where your tax dollars go. Next slide. This chart gives you a quick one-shot view of the changes from FY21. Fiscal year 21 is where we are today. Fiscal year 22 is the budget that we're building. And so this tells you what's new, what's different, what's gone. The budget from in FY22 retains some of the folks that we added with COVID in mind. We added 2 school nurses, and that need remains. We now have 1 nurse, a registered nurse in each of our school buildings, 2 in the larger buildings. Critical need, they've been working tirelessly to keep us safe this year. 1 special education teacher that we added is going to be retained. And we didn't add 23 bus driver positions. That's our full complement of bus drivers. And we want to retain our full complement of bus drivers, even though our community has been driving their kids all year long and allowing us to distance on buses. We're going to need all of those positions when we get back to filling our buses. The budget removes some of the funding that was specifically allocated for COVID preparations because we've prepared and we're there. It restores some positions that were lost in the FY21 budget. About $1.8 million was reduced out of our current year budget, causing us to lose a number of positions that we are hoping to restore We behaved in emergency mode in the spring of 2020 when we were trying to build the budget for this year. And we acknowledged that we were in a difficult time and we didn't know what the future would hold. So we eliminated a number of positions, and now we are hoping to restore those, knowing that we are heading back into what may be a little bit more normal year, and also knowing what the loss of those positions has cost us in this current year. This budget also adds a half-time social worker. We have a half-time position that we'd like to make full-time. That is, I hope, an obvious choice in a situation where our kids' social emotional needs are so high. That would be at the high school. It also adds 2 special education ed techs based on a new rule coming down from the State Department of Education that extends the amount of time that teenagers can be in high school. It extends the age limit, and so we will have students in school longer in special education programs. 5 classroom teachers are included in this current budget proposal that was passed by the board. However, since that time, we've received word that we will be getting funding from the federal government. And this is sort of too in the weeds for me to explain all the different grants that we've had. I'm throwing you back to the budget book. It's all in there. However, we do know that we have sufficient funding with this last round to go back to the round before that and use that money to pay for the 5 classroom teachers. So it's our proposal that those will be removed from our operating budget, but the positions will be able to be funded with federal funds. Next slide, Cal. When we put a budget out for first reading, there are always items in motion. And items in motion means that we don't know all of the details of our outside costs that are influenced by outside factors, typically until we get further into the budget process. So this is a list of the various things that we take a look at between first and second reading. I'll call your attention to the nice red words that say that the Anthem health insurance, the increased value that we budgeted is about $350,000. And with the funding coming in, the premiums coming in flat, that's a savings, which is awesome. Unfortunately, we're going to need that savings to pay for the debt service estimate, which was too low. So that kind of washes things out. But we do have a number of other moving pieces that we're keeping an eye on. And our hope is to be able to reduce our ask for our budget proposal that went in first reading, so that in second reading we can have a smaller number, but also meet the needs of our students. Next slide, Cal. There are a number of items in our capital budget, and again, I didn't represent that here on a slide, but there are 2 items that we're particularly watching the cost on and we'll be having more conversations around. As you may have heard, the school department has taken on the turf field and track renovation project that was proposed by the town some years ago. And we have added that into our budget this year and plan to be the supporters and promoters of that project. And we are working on budget estimates that will help us refine that number a little bit. And the second item here, bulleted here, is our long-range planning project. And with that, we've got a placeholder number in our budget, and we are leaning on our building steering committee to help us figure out if that's the right number and to define what that amount of money will purchase for us. I think we can do the next one. Oh, look, it's the budget calendar. So I'm going to leave you with this slide. I think the next one, which Kelly can scoot by, it has a link to the budget portal, and it has a bunch of sort of fine print around all of the words I've been speaking to you. But do take note of that calendar. Please memorize it, print it out, and put it on your fridge, and share it with your friends, because your support along the way here is really going to be critical to us being able to retain what is in this budget proposal, which will then allow us to spend the federal funds that we may have available on getting our kids back to school with the restrictions that we're facing. Do you want to have some question time on this, April, or?
Absolutely. If there's anybody on the board who would like to ask Kate a question, I know we've seen this material a bunch of times, but for the public, I just feel like it, we have a great audience. We have a ton of people who are engaged in our meetings. And so we wanted to take another opportunity to just go through the budget from a high level. And to speak to Kate's points, being at this point, your advocacy as constituents is so needed at town council finance committee meetings, at our own finance committee meetings, at full board meetings, at town council meetings. Email the town council, not just the school board, to advocate for our investments. They're going to be looking to hear what people are going to be willing to support at referendum, just like they do every year. And so we really need to provide that strong voice for our kids so that we can get a nice, budget that will serve their needs in the fall, because we know that the needs are going to be great. Does anybody have any questions for Kate? Not seeing any. Thank you very much, Kate and Sarah, for pulling that together for us today.
Welcome. Thank
Thanks,
you.
Agenda item 7.0 is superintendent report. And tonight, Mr. Prince will be presenting the fall reopening update.
Thank you, April. Indeed, we're here tonight to talk about the opening of school. And that's been our goal, to return full-time in person in the fall. Next slide, please. We have some assumptions that hopefully these assumptions are correct, that the 3-foot distancing will continue to be in place for students in September. We will come back to school full time, but we need to be proactive with safety nets to support us if pandemic conditions change, such as if we need to temporarily go yellow or red because of an outbreak. As you know, DOE is developing a roadmap to the recovery plan, and that will be coming out hopefully soon. We've been waiting for that, and I did call DOE, and they explained to me that that should be coming pretty soon, and we're looking forward to seeing what they have to say that will match our plan, and we can learn from their plan. Next slide, please. So this year, we've had our facilities director, Todd Jepson, work with a local commercial broker for a listing of commercial office spaces. Because again, part of thinking ahead, we were a little worried that we may have to get some other spaces because we just don't have enough space in the building to bring everybody back. So he's been working with a commercial broker just to kind of keep us abreast of possibilities out there in the community. We entered into a conversation with the university. We have close ties with University of Southern Maine. Both the professor, Dr. Flynn Ross, and the dean came over to, we're on Zoom with them, talking about the potential of having interns within the district. And there's a possibility for that. There's some limitations on that. And I'll just give you a quick example. When you take an intern, the new model now is to try to have that intern end up with part of a classroom. And as the intern gets more experience, potentially maybe they could take on a couple more students. The disadvantage that they really would like to have the intern be in their own classroom. And so, that's a little bit of a limitation for us here in Scarborough. But again, we want to continue to have those conversations because we think it's an opportunity if we need to go that route. Todd has been in touch with our architect firm to really look at maximizing current space utilization, and he'll be talking about that tonight. And then we are forming reopening planning committees, going to be school-based, and to really look at the logistics, the challenges, and the opportunities for each school as we begin to open school in the fall. And those committees will be meeting starting fairly soon in May, and we have good representation, hopefully, from the community on that as well. The site, as I was just talking about, the school-based teams. Again, first of all, I want to just congratulate the START committee last summer for the work that they did. It was really a representation to come together and represent all the schools and departments. And now we're just feeling that, again, we could be more localized at each building, and for each building to have teachers, a school nurse, parents, students, school board member, support staff, and administrator come together and really begin to talk about the fall and to kind of get into the nitty-gritty of what that's going to look like. Next slide. So we are committed. We're really trying to do some good planning. I'm very optimistic, and I do appreciate people's patience. I know this has been a long haul, particularly for the parents. And I put a letter out today to the staff, just explaining to them that I hope they have a wonderful vacation. I know it's been a hard year, and that I mentioned to them that we'd be presenting this work tonight, and I'm hoping we have some staff members that are watching. Next slide. So Todd Jepson is going to jump in and kind of walk through the next 2 or 3 slides. He's the expert when it comes to classroom space. Todd, are you out there?
Yes, I am. Thank you. Yes, as Sandy said, we've been working really hard to analyze all of our spaces. And as you all know, the whole spacing demands from the DOE have been a bit of a moving target. We started out with 6-foot distancing, and last month it was changed to 3 feet of distancing. So as we were working our classroom spacing, we then had to go back and change it all to 3 and keep it 6 feet from the teachers, and bear in mind that students needed to be 6 feet apart to eat. It wasn't just a simple draw a box and stick in the chairs and desks and students. It was a little bit more complicated. And so we are in the process of adjusting. The other challenge in our district is that at every school, there are varying room sizes. And in every phase level, there are different materials and supplies and equipment in the classrooms that take up space. And so we've done a lot of weeding and condensing and storing. If you've driven by any of the schools, especially the high school, you'll see all these large storage containers and so forth. So the challenge has been to try to get as many students as possible in a classroom with those varying sizes. For example, at the elementary schools, the primary schools, they actually have 3 different size classrooms because the buildings that were built originally in the 50s and 60s, then the renovated sections in the 90s, and now the portables that are added onto all of them as well. They're all different sizes. So anyway, our work with Harriman, they have been our long-range facilities planning firm for quite a few years. They actually built and designed the renovated high school as well as Wentworth. So we had a lot of things in place already in terms of size. So it began with them several weeks ago, and we are finalizing those drawings and maximum student occupant loads for the classrooms. And it's looking really positive in terms of how many kids we can get in. There will definitely be some compromise for the way the rooms are laid out. It's going to feel rather uniform, I'm afraid, but that's something that we're willing to work with. The other challenges we've had is that the enrollment has been a bit of a moving target. So we're trying to keep our eye on the most realistic numbers of the students that will be returning. At a school like the high school, course offerings also impact how many kids are in what types of courses, because the kids can sign up for their classes, unlike in other lower level schools. Staffing has been a huge challenge. In order to get back with the numbers we can fit in classroom is going to require more teaching staff to be in those classrooms. Transportation also is a challenge. And probably the resounding refrain we heard from all the principals this week when we met with them to show them what we have come up with so far is feeding the students, and a place to do that in the way that the DOE and CDC recommend with the 6-foot distancing. It's really challenging at the K2 schools and the middle school to do that. And if you were walking through, you would see desks and tables in very strange places to accommodate the feeding of the students that has to take place. And again, the overarching goal we try to keep in mind is to follow the guidelines and keep all of the occupants safe. Next slide, please. In this process, as Sandy referenced, we have considered many alternative space considerations are in the town, everything from churches to, as Sandy referenced, commercial office spaces. The first challenge was to see, I always look at how much space we have and say, can't we make what we have work? So we started out by storing everything outside of classrooms and making more room inside our buildings for these things to happen. I mentioned that earlier with all the storage containers and things stored in spaces that technically they shouldn't be stored in, like boiler rooms and hallway corners and things. And then we reconfigured some spaces within the buildings or we changed purposes of rooms. For example, the Pleasant Hills staff and faculty room is now a special education space with several employees who work in that department in there. And we've found an alternative space cordoned off in the Pleasant Hill cafeteria for the staff. So again, there's been a lot of compromise and goodwill asked of the staff, and they've all complied and done a great job. And it's really been encouraging to see the willingness and flexibility of the staff. Last fall, we also set up tents for just a mask break or an outdoor classroom setting or an eating area on nice days. We'll put those back up right after the April break, now that the ground is drying up and it's getting a little warmer out. The pictures on the right on this slide are actually of what I consider to be the most promising community space. It's the Point, or East Point Community Church. It's in the old Bob's Discount Furniture Store near Clark's Pond Home Depot, if you haven't been there. It's a beautiful space. We had someone reach out to us from that place, and they have several spaces that could be used as classrooms. I visited there and we looked over the whole thing. They also have a gym and another sort of an indoor turf field. And it had some real potential. We also talked with the Rock Church and St. Max's Church. Those were actually not going to be alternatives for us. Scarborough Downs also offered a space in their sort of on-track observation area. It's a big space. It's more of an auditorium style space, and we're going to be challenged by the ongoing activities in that building and to be combined with school operations. So, and then finally, as many of you know, our community services department is operating their childcare facility out of the old House of Lights, which they've now called the Hub. And we've talked with them about the potential of, maybe a portion or some segments of that space being used as alternative classrooms or overflow classrooms if the need arises. And then the town manager referenced that the Alger hall. It's a Masonic, the old Masonic Lodge down by Dunstan Fire Station is now owned by the town. And I looked at that, and I can tell you with 100% certainty that will not work. It has some significant air quality issues that I wouldn't want staff or students exposed to. But I still appreciate everyone reaching out and giving us some great ideas. Back to the point, we put in a bunch of questions after our visit, and we are waiting to hear back from them about some of the questions that we have in terms of how to make something like that work. Next slide, please. Finally, the commercial properties that we've looked at, I've connected with the Dunham Group, and they have put out a listing from all firms besides Dunham Group of the various commercial properties that are available, and some of them are might be suitable, but might also be combined with other businesses, which may not want the sort of disruptive neighbor of a school or school classes there, but ongoing conversations there and visits planned. Everything from professional office space to sort of industrial park kind of warehouse spaces that might be able to accommodate or be quickly renovated or dusted off, shall we say, to accommodate additional space if we need that come the fall. Challenges there are they really easily convertible? The things we think about aren't just desks and chairs. There are things like technology and safety and security and transportation and meals, indoor air quality, where do the nursing and health staff reside? That is all what I consider to be the infrastructure, sort of the intangible. All the stuff I handle is tangible. But I have to take all these things into consideration when deeming something worthy of classroom space. And the good news is I'm not the only one that has to decide that. So finally, the town manager referred us to the person who has some space in the old Bessie School, which is across the road from the town hall, and also some space above the Scarborough grounds business across the street. I've got calls into that person as well, and I'm waiting to hear back as well. And then finally, we actually even just drove up to this childcare facility, which is on Route 114 between Eight Corners and Payne Road. And unfortunately, that space has been consumed by a physical therapy business. So it's being converted. It's already been taken, unfortunately. So we were a little late to the trough there. So the good news is from our studies with Harriman is it's looking like we can get more desks or students in a classroom so that fall reopening is looking quite promising. It will again involve some adjustments in terms of class sizes, which may impact staffing, and hopefully we'll have the budget to do that. We're also challenged by the types of furnishings. The slide I first showed had desks in it. Most of our elementary schools have tables, but we're also finding that as we analyze how you set up the tables, that it's looking quite promising that we'll get quite a few students in a classroom with the tables as well. Again, other precautions in place. I don't have a lot more to say other than I think we're looking really good to house our students on our own properties for the fall based on the results of our Harriman study, and that with some sort of creative programming and staffing, I think we're heading in the right direction for a positive outcome for fall and our students in our own buildings, full on 5 days a week, in my opinion.
Thank
Sandy,
you,
I'll
Todd.
hand it back to you.
Appreciate it. I think we have one more slide. So this is just to pick up what Todd had talked about. Again, we're very optimistic for September that all students will be back in the Scarborough schools. The need will be to hire additional 12 teachers, and we'll continue to look at the ESSER 3 funds that will assist with trying to make sure that we can hire at least 12 teachers. And that's the real need here, is now that we can get the number of desks or tables in the classrooms, now we need more staff. And over the summer, I think Todd will continue to repurpose different spaces in the certain schools, just to make sure that we're ready for September. So I'm 100% confident at this point in time that we will have all our students back in school for fall. And I think that is the last slide.
Thank you so much, Sandy and Todd, for presenting all of that information. At this time, I will take board member questions and comments. Nick, you can go first.
Let me unmute myself. There I am. So what I have to say is more of a comment than a question. It's really addressed to the board, but also everybody in attendance. So first, I want to thank you, Sandy, and all of our staff and community members who have contributed to this work aimed at reopening our schools. I also want to thank the people that have spoken in public comment recently and shared their passion and concerns regarding the status of our school and students. Tonight, we heard several people talk about a desire for transparency, and our success for the rest of this year and next fall really depends on that. Many families in our community have experienced multiple COVID-19 close contacts and or infections over the past 13 months. And I can understand how that's frightening and frustrating and stressful and disruptive all at the same time. I want to thank most of those families for being forthright and communicating with our schools so that we can take steps to keep your children and our staff safer. But in the interest of full transparency, I also want to say that it's come to light that some may not have been completely transparent and communicative in the ways that I just outlined. So I'm asking, please, to everybody in attendance, and share it with anybody you talk with. And if your child tests positive or part of your family is asked to quarantine, please heed that advice and notify your child's school and those that are potentially impacted. Our collective success as we endeavor to return to more in-person learning this year and next fall depends on you. Thanks.
Thanks, Nick. Gabby, and then Shannon.
First, I just want to say, thank you for all this work. It's making me really hopeful for my senior year, and it's exciting to hear about. I actually have two questions. So my first one is, with the separation of church and state rule, is it allowed for public schools to teach in a church? I don't know if that's a rule. And then also, for the older high school students who would be vaccinated in the fall, do you know if the 3 feet rule still applies to them?
So your last question, Gabby, my understanding is there's a lot of movement with the Superintendent's Association to have perhaps DOE, CDC to look at those guidelines, particularly for the cafeteria and other restrictions, because if we didn't have those restrictions, we would be much in a better place. So I think there's a lot of movement to have the governor and her colleagues up there to really look at what we're asking. So I think more will come from that. I don't want to lead people to think it's going to happen, but there's a big movement to look at that. And your other question was, remind me.
Sorry about that. It was about the church and state and public schools and churches.
So that's a really good point. We would have to, if we get, at this point in time, we're not really going to move forward with any additional space. But if we had to, then I think we would have to pursue that with our school attorney and get some information on that. Good questions.
Thanks, Gabby. Go ahead, Shannon.
I had a question about the study, and I'm not sure if Todd, perhaps you said this and I just missed it, but how many, I know the classrooms are different sizes, but how many students per class can we fit in based on the new study?
I'm sorry, I'm gonna get it's really a range of size of numbers. So I think we're up to 16 to 19 at the maximum, depending on the largest size classrooms. So, and that's with, again, realistic, put them up against the wall, even if we're blocking a bookcase, get them in there and keep them 6 feet from the teacher and 3 feet apart. And then allowing reasonably, when I did this, I actually sat in a student chair and said, how much space is it going to take for a child to slide back and get out of their desk if they have to go to the bathroom or something. So we gave a few inches extra for them to go in and out and still remain 3 feet from the person behind them, with the desk, separating them. So I think 16 to 19, depending on the school and the classroom they're in, is what we've come up with now.
Gotcha. Thank you.
Thanks, Todd. KT.
Is there one building that will have a greater staffing need than any other one, or is the 12 teachers pretty well spread out?
Diane, do you?
Yeah, so the 12 teachers really are nested more at the K-8 level than they are at the high school. And again, that's just because, high school operates very differently than any of our other phase levels do. So, that is 12 teachers. That's above and beyond the budget proposal that Kate and Sandy shared at the beginning of the presentation tonight. But again, I think that if we can target those latest ESSER funds towards that, that will certainly better position us to be able to fit that need.
Thanks, guys. I don't see any other hands, so I will go ahead and say my comment, which is Todd touched on this a little bit, and we had someone touch on this in public comment. One of our biggest challenges, my understanding, is the eating, is the making sure that the kids can unmask, because right now the guideline is still 6 feet. Are we anticipating that it will be 3 feet for eating in the fall? Like, is that our assumption? Because that to me seems like it's still going to be a really big challenge to fill our schools, and all the desks and all the configurations are going to be set up for 3 feet, but we still have to find a way for them to be able to eat 6 feet, correct? Yeah.
Cafeteria is the biggest challenge for most districts.
If I might butt in here a little bit, the cafeterias also are the gymnasium facility in the K2 schools. So under normal circumstances, it's challenging to serve lunch and then clean it all up. For those of you who are parents, and I'm a parent of 2 boys, kids make a mess when they eat, and then squeeze the kids back in for phys ed. Under normal circumstances, that is nail-bitingly tight. And now with 6-foot distancing, kids eating in their classrooms and 1 custodian in the building, huge challenge there. So we can make it happen, and we will. My staff has been amazing. If I could take a public moment to commend my custodial and maintenance staff for the work they have done under these circumstances. They have been astounding. Walk through any school and look at them. They're clean, and the custodians are showing up, and the maintenance guys are shuffling furniture every which way and stuffing them every corner and container they can find. I can't say enough about my staff, and I appreciate all of those who have acknowledged that to us, because it goes a long way in keeping us going. So thank you.
Thanks, Todd. And definitely on our behalf, let them know our hats are off. We couldn't do it without them, and we know that. Sarah and then Alicia.
Thanks, April. Todd, at a prior meeting, I forget what it was now, and it was a while ago, we talked about there's like a desk and chair shortage, in not just in Scarborough, Maine, but it sounds like in the country. Does that impact our plans to be able to go back full time with the 3 feet distance with more desk and equipment than we have today?
I'm going to answer that with the utmost confidence and say no.
Okay.
The biggest place we were challenged is we moved a lot of tables out of the middle school. We saved the ones that we could absolutely reuse. Some of them literally, they were 26 years old or whatever, 25 years old the building is, and they fell apart when we moved them, so we had to throw them out. But I have successfully ordered over 400 more desks for the middle school, and they will be here, as I've been promised, sometime in June. So they will be here for the fall. We'll have the middle school ready, and I think we're going to be able to make the tables work at the K2s with the numbers that we are allowed to have in those spaces. And it could be, again, some creative programming on the teachers and principals of those schools' part. But again, they've stepped up and done an amazing job in their tiny little schools. So they're making it happen. So I'm pretty confident, Sarah, that we can not worry about furniture.
Awesome. Thank you.
Great. Go ahead, Alicia.
Thank you. I don't know what the plan format for the restart committees are, but hearing the public's comment tonight, that we heard a theme that they wanted transparency and to be kept updated. I was wondering if we could tape those meetings and then post them, if that's a possibility.
I think we could look into that. I just don't know if the meetings were held at different times, and I think we could make sure we could get a camera set up. I'm not sure how many cameras we have, to be honest with you, between the town and the schools, but certainly if we could do that, we will do it. I think it's a great idea, and it's great for people from the public to be able to watch those. It wouldn't be live necessarily. Yeah.
I will take the opportunity to put in a plug for my fellow board members too. If you haven't let me know your availability and your interest to serve on one of those building committees, shoot me an email and let me know if you can volunteer your time to do that. That would be great because it helps us keep the public informed too. The more we know. Leanne.
Just a couple of quick things. I want to confirm that it is the 5 that we've already requested plus 12. So we're looking at 17 teachers that we would need for this plan to work.
Okay.
Yeah. And then I guess it's a plea really to the community. It kind of backs into what was said earlier. Please do support this with town council. Let them know how important these 17 teachers are, how the budget really is going to need to be able to support this in order for the doors to open and all the students to come back full time. It sounds like this is really the most critical piece of the plan is the staffing. Thanks.
Thanks, Leanne. I do see our attendees who have their hands raised. Unfortunately, during a board meeting, at this point, I don't take public comment from anyone who's in attendance. But if you have a question or a comment, you can email us at boe@scarboroughschools.org, and I will be happy to get you an answer to your question and address your comment there. Are there any other board members who would like to make a comment or ask a question? I'm not seeing any. So thank you again to Todd and to Sandy for the prep that went into giving the community an update tonight. I know that it was much anticipated, and I'm sure we will get additional questions as the weeks go by. And to address the transparency issue, as frequently as we can give you an update. I had a request for this to be on every agenda from now until the end of school. And I can't make that guarantee right now because we don't know what the update for May 6th would look like. But by all means, if we have something to share, we will share it. And also I want to point out that board meetings are certainly not the only way that we share information. There's a district newsletter that goes out weekly now, every Friday. And so, that's a great source of information in terms of just getting that rolling update. And so if you're not already reading that newsletter or clicking on that newsletter, make sure you give it a whirl. With that, I will go ahead and move on to agenda item 8.0, which is new business. Tonight, agenda item 8.1 is the second reading of the 2021-2022 school calendar.
Want me to take it, April?
I would love for you to tee this up, Alicia. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So just like to back up to the history of what's gone on with the school calendar. We do have a board policy, ICA, that talks about how the board school calendar should be approved, and that is supposed to be that administration presents the calendar to policy committee, and the policy committee does the work at that level and then makes a recommendation to the full board. And I guess historically that hasn't been followed, and so we've been trying to do that this year. We've got a little, I would say, some growing pains, but and probably it's partly because of this is a tough year in general. So the two real issues I think that we were faced with were the request by administration for Wednesdays, whether it be for professional development of our staff, whether it be for late start or early release, and the frequency by which that should occur. And then there was a question of the start days and how in particular at the lower levels, how the administration felt that there needed to be sort of a staggered approach to provide an opportunity for our students to, see the school, to get used to that, get used to their schedule, their friends, their bus ride, perhaps, and to get tested, and to also allow the teachers some time to prepare. And so those are obviously things that are very important, but we've also heard that our kids are struggling and parents feel strongly that kids need to be back in school full time. And so the request by administration was brought to us, and the policy committee then met just as a group, and Diane asked us to come up with some proposals. We did come up with 5 proposals that was presented back to the building level principals to determine if there were any of those proposals that they could support, because the consensus of the committee was that the staggered start of the school year was a little too slow, given the concerns that we had heard from parents. So we did agree on, or we had a consensus that it was not unanimous, to go with the proposal 5, which is not what administration recommended initially. Again, that they recommended a slower, more staggered approach that would allow the kids to ease back into school. And I guess if we can move to the next slide, I think that's where we'll see so this is the proposal from leadership. And it would have us returning back to school on September 13 for K through 5. Now, the issue for the older grades was not really, it was interesting because part of the discussion that we had was about how the transition should occur, which really isn't the school board's purview, because it's not our responsibility to try to run the schools, but it became a discussion that we had to have because of the calendar. And so we didn't have to do that at the higher grades. And so it was a little awkward and uncomfortable, I would say, to have sort of a difference of opinion. But I think that, Diane, maybe I'll pass it on to you to present the administration request initially, and then I'll go back to sort of where we wound up, if that's okay.
Sure, that's fine. So this was the proposal from the leadership team, and our K-5 principals presented that at the policy meeting on Tuesday. And as Alicia has pointed out previously, that the purpose of the time as presented is to build connections with students and families, to give folks a broad overview, to provide individual appointments to get to know families, and provide tours for the school, since many of our families will have never stepped foot inside their child's current school before, since, you know, by the time we head back to school, we will not have had folks inside schools for 18 months. And so you can see here, the original proposal has September 1st and 2nd as specific appointment times. Again, our teachers would be spending, you know, the entire day meeting with each of their families. And then following the extended Labor Day weekend, which has been traditional on our calendar, the following week would be a half a day on the 7th and 8th for half of the classroom to again engage kids, get them used to the way things are organized and the protocols that will have to be followed. And on the morning of the 9th and the 10th, all of the students would be together. And you can see that from the 7th through 10th on the proposal, students would be attending for half a day, and that would be to allow teachers an opportunity in the afternoon to have individual screening appointments with each of the students. I think everybody is well aware that there is definitely concern about learning loss or where our students are starting from. And so it is going to be really important for all of our staff to have solid information about the skills that students in their classes are coming with so that they can plan for instruction appropriately. If you can go to the next slide, Kelly. The K-5 administrators at the meeting on Tuesday also provided a rationale for their request. They had worked together with their school teams and staff around this proposal. They felt strongly that, again, as I mentioned in the previous slide, actually 2/3 of our families at the K-5 level will never have been inside their child's school before. Students won't have been in school full time, and none of our students will have had a full year in their school because of, you know, this pandemic that we've had. And in order to provide a little bit more information, they also wanted to give some reasoning for why we have screening appointments for K-5 students. And again, you can see those listed here, not just about making connections with students, but also meeting their families, getting important information about their students. The beginning of the year is always a time for teachers to connect with families and to get to know their kids. But at this time, you know, there may be more information in terms of, you know, how children have fared during this hybrid learning time that parents feel is important to share. And we want to honor the time that it would take to have each of those conversations, and also building relationships. And so that is in addition to, you know, some of the academic screening that would happen. The next slide. Actually, this goes on to talk about early release, so we can probably hold off on that for now so that we can have this part of the conversation. Does that make sense to you, Alicia?
Sure. So the thank you, Diane, for doing that. So the proposal that the policy committee came up with was that on September 1st, grades 6 and 9 would go into for an introduction to school, which I think is something that's been occurring. K5 would be appointment by only, be by appointment only. And then September 2nd would be grades 6 through 12 will be attending school. K5 will be by appointment only. And again, that would allow for that screening to occur. On September 3rd, we have no school. September 6th, we have no school, it's Labor Day. September 7th, again, students grades 6 through 12 will be attending. K5 will be a half day. And on the next day, the 8th, 6 to 12 will be in school. K5 will be a half day, morning only on both of those days. And then on 9-10, all students will return back to school. And this was not unanimous in the committee level. It was something that was proposed to administration that they said that they could live with. It was something that I think as a group we said that we could live with, and it was to try to find a middle ground to meet the needs of the kids after hearing administration's, really strong feeling about the need for that testing and that preparation, and that this is going to be really difficult and overwhelming to the kids, along with hearing very strongly from our community that they feel that kids need to be back in school. And I don't know if you want to ask questions about the start of the day, start of the year, or if so, we could do that now and then move on to the Wednesday discussion more fully.
My recommendation would be that we discuss this portion first, and then we discuss the early release portion next, if that's okay with everybody.
Yeah, that's fine with me.
Great. Kristen has her hand up.
Yeah, can you just explain to me the difference between what's happening on the 1st and 2nd versus the afternoons of the 7th and 8th, like what the different screenings are?
Did you say Alicia?
Anyone?
Maybe Diane could answer that.
Yeah, the 1st and the 2nd would be for appointments with families. And so again, those would be the meetings that I described where parents could talk about, it's kind of like a parent-teacher conference, right? At the beginning of the school year. But again, because of the most recent experiences that folks have had and students have had in terms of, our hybrid environment, folks thought that was important. And so it would be relationship building, finding out more about students and giving parents that chance to experience the school. And then the screening appointments, which would happen on the half days on the following week, would be dedicated to getting that academic information. So, I can totally appreciate, without recapping the entire policy meeting, that we've come to a compromise here, or that was the suggestion. But I would just make sure that people understand that it will not be possible for a teacher to screen every student in their class in 2 half days. And so, we will have to make a plan for how to set those up and when other students can be screened, whether that be hiring substitutes or having other people cover what, but that will be a creative problem solving that we will have to engage in.
Okay, thank you.
Nick and then Sarah.
So I just want to add, I think I got my head around exactly what's being proposed here, but given what Diane just said, it kind of sparked something for me. So if those 2 half days for K5 aren't enough to get that screening done, why wouldn't we do that as 2 full days to be able to get that done? I'm just wondering.
Diane, do you want to, I think it's I think you're a little confused, Nick, and definitely, Diane, correct me if I'm wrong. Nick, I think that half day time, the 2 half days,
yep,
all kids will have gone home and the parents bring their child back for a screening appointment. And what Diane is saying is that those 2 half days are not enough time to do those screening appointments. So that's why the administration had asked for 4 half days.
So, okay, so the AM only is actually AM instruction and the afternoon is the screening.
Yes.
I think
Okay.
the idea behind it was to help kids transition back to school. I think our administrators, again, I don't want to speak for them, but I guess I am because I'm on the meeting, that our administrators wanted to, respond to parents' desire to, make sure that we're getting kids back in soon enough, but also being really thoughtful about the transition. Like this is just a different start. And so wanting to be thoughtful around that time. But, certainly if, the board wants to consider just providing that in one fell swoop and not having that staggered approach, again, I think that administration is open to whatever folks can support to make sure that our students have a thoughtful return.
Okay.
Sarah, go ahead.
So sorry if I'm not understanding. I thought where Nick was going with his question was the same question that I had, which was, I guess, couldn't we use the full 9-1 and 9-2, which is by appointment only, to do some of those screenings?
We can certainly look at how to structure the time that we have. Again, this was the proposal that was brought forward by the team. And again, if this is the time that they have, they can go back and figure out what is the best way to structure that.
You can see where the conversation gets muddy because that type of discussion was really uncomfortable for me as a board member to have, because, that's not really within our responsibilities. And so it's just the calendar. And so, but in order to make the calendar work, we need to consider, well, how many days of screening do you need, and how to structure that. And so it's a tough conversation.
Yeah, and I think if you don't mind, April, like just to piggyback on what you were saying, Alicia, I think I heard you say, Diane, that we may not be able to do all the screenings, or it's going to be a challenge to do all the screenings in the half days, which is why the proposal was for the full days. And maybe it's my ignorance, right? I'm just not fully understanding why we couldn't use the 9-1 and the 9-2 days to do some of that screening as well, which is why I asked the question. So.
Idea originally was that if we think about kids coming in, never having met someone before, and like, hey, hello, nice to meet you, sit down, let me give you this reading assessment. And so in the planning, our administrators were really thinking about that relationship building first, so that, they weren't just reading kids cold. But again, I think that whatever time that we are given, we will look to maximize for our students.
Kristen?
Yeah, I had more of just a comment about going back to school. And I know that in years past, the PTA has been really helpful getting kids to meet some of their new classmates and acclimated to school. And we've had a ton of offers from the community to pitch in where they can. So maybe there's some more opportunities there between the parents, some of the more seasoned parents who know the school and the PTA, and getting some people back to the buildings. That's it.
Does anyone else want to make a comment on this portion of the calendar? So I'll make my comment then. as Alicia said, the recommendation came out of the policy committee. It's our job at the committee level, all of us, no matter what committee we're on, is to try and build consensus. You know, Alicia pointed out, there was a dissenting voice, and that was me. And that's not to say that I can't or won't support the committee's recommendation, but just to kind of, you know, explain to the board why I felt the way I did, is just, you know, I think that we're getting a little bogged down. I personally feel like we're getting a little bogged down with this idea that the kids aren't actually back in school, or that the start date isn't until the 13th, or, you know, these sound bites kind of, you know, roll around. But the kids are there. They're there every day, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday, in different iterations of being there. And they're not, and that's actually, I'm misspeaking, because they're not there both Tuesday and Wednesday. That was split by alphabet. And, you know, those screening appointments, again, for me, I just feel like it's so important to get these kids off to a great start, and we all want the best possible outcome for our kids, every single person who works so hard. And it might just be a difference of opinion that I think those screening appointments and having the kids be all over the map this year, those screening appointments are probably going to take longer than they have typically taken. The teachers are going to, you know, maybe need that extra time for the kids to, you know, get used to being assessed, and all of those things. And I just think there's a lot of unknowns. The admin asked for 4 half days. The compromise was 2 half days. And that's, you know, kind of where we landed. And so that's why I wasn't 100% on board with the recommendation of the policy committee. Max.
I just wanted to agree with you about just like phasing back into school. I mean, like, I agree the teachers are probably going to have a lot of newer issues surrounding just kids being prepared, and like a lot of people have commented, there's been some lost time this year. Also, the whole thing about like students have not really had a full normal day of school in like 18 months. So going back 5 days a week is definitely going to be very difficult. It's probably going to take a real physical toll on them for the most part. So I would just support like going back in as slow as possible, not as slow as possible, but like as comfortably as possible.
Thanks, Max. So if there are no other comments on this portion, the other part of the calendar that we need to approve and vote on tonight is related to the proposal that came from our leadership about early release versus late start and the frequency of those days. And I will kick it back over to you, Alicia, if you want to talk about the policy committee's recommendation.
Actually, Diane, do you want to start with the leadership's proposal for early release?
Sure. And again, I also have the data from the surveys that will be in the next couple of slides as well. So, you know, I can present both of those. So the proposal from the leadership team in regards to early release time was to, again, have some focus time during this transition back to school to full in-person learning. We certainly know that there are going to continue to be some challenges as we bridge back over to a more normal 5-day-a-week schedule for all of our students and families. We also wanted to make sure that people recognize that there is time necessary for improvement efforts. This actually came up last night in our DEI committee, where we're working on developing an action plan for diversity, equity, and inclusion. We had a great discussion with some of our high school students who had actually gone down to K2 to deliver some professional development to our teachers yesterday afternoon. And some of the things that they recognized was that there is a lot of room for growth and a lot of things that our teachers may not have had for professional development because of, you know, their tenure with us, or the fact that the district hasn't really dug into this kind of training in the past. And so there's a lot of work ahead, and it was noted, you know, by at least one individual in the meeting last night that when is this work going to happen? And so again, we need time with folks in front of us to move these things forward. And so we had listed for the policy committee when we had met, not just Tuesday, this actually comes back to our original proposal, that some of the big things on the plate right now for the district, besides the DEI work, also includes the social emotional learning and the plan. We've had a social emotional team that's been working for the past 2 years in terms of looking at curriculum for all of our students and really making sure that we're attending to those needs. And so they're getting ready to launch off that work. Our grade level teams, certainly at some levels more than others, really struggle to find time for teachers to meet. If you go to one of our smaller schools, for example, the first grade teachers don't have common planning time. And so there isn't the ability to just pull people together while kids are at specials and provide them with that training, because everybody's schedule is so unique. And we also, you know, have heard about the need for us to review our curriculum and update our curriculum. And, you know, as an example on this slide, our science and social studies curriculum have not been reviewed for a number of years. And then another example is the shift in state testing. The state has moved away from the Empower Me, the traditional MEA test, and they're asking all districts to start using NWEA. And that's great for the 50% of the districts in the state that had been using that. We have not been using NWEA, and so that's another professional development piece for our teachers, because it's not just giving the assessment, but it's how do you use those assessments? How do you make sure that it's not just a check mark that we tested our kids, but you're actually looking at the results to help you plan for instruction. So these are just some of the things. And again, I know that time is at a premium, and we certainly recognize that. We want to have our kids in school. We also have to figure out how to make sure that we provide the skills and development that our teachers need to be the most effective. If you go to the next slide, this slide is the parent survey data. So in late March, when this was still under development, we had surveyed staff and parents, because as some of you know, traditionally in the past several years, the district has done a late start. And this year during the pandemic, we have had an early release. And so we wanted to get a sense from our community about where their preferences lied. And so this is the parent data. So if you take a look at it, you can see that 57% of our families preferred the afternoon versus the morning. And then the second question, the pie chart that is below, asked about what plan for professional development could folks support. And so the choices were a weekly late start or early release, a bi-weekly late start or early release, or maintaining the traditional once a month early release that we have had. And again, that would be a 90-minute early release or late start. And as you can see here, 67% of our parents wanted to maintain the current once a month schedule. If we move to the next slide, you can see how that compares to staff. Staff felt a little bit more strongly than parents about having early release, but again, there was agreement there that staff felt like early release was more productive than late start. And the second question in regards to which of those three models for professional development would staff support, 43% of the staff said they could support weekly, 34% said once a month, and 22% said once a week. So, you know, those are just, again, other points of information. I know that you had asked as a board to have us provide that for you in terms of the feedback from parents and from our staff. And so we wanted to make sure that you had that.
Thank you, Diane. So I think we were unanimous in our recommendation about Wednesdays, and that was that it should be once monthly early release. And one of the prime considerations in coming to that recommendation was the fact that community services indicated that they're not able to support our students on Wednesdays for early release on a regular basis. And so, you know, that was a concern for us. It's interesting because if we're gonna make a move like this, the argument and the discussion was that, you know, maybe this is the time to do it because people have shown that they're able to do it. And then on the other hand, maybe it's like, you know, the worst time. So, but for me personally, the fact that community services was not available was a really strong consideration. I also thought it was interesting that staff wasn't overwhelmingly advocating for weekly professional development. So it's hard as a sort of a layperson to understand why some of those things happen. And so to hear all of the work that needs to happen, and know that, you know, our staff are so devoted and dedicated, and to see that, you know, only about 40-something% supported weekly professional development was just sort of curious to me. So those are our recommendations, and I think we could open up to questions for the Wednesdays if that's okay with you, April.
Yep, sounds great. Shannon, you're first.
Thanks, April. I just have more of a comment to the Wednesday schedule. I definitely, I don't think my vote or my say is, I don't want it to sound like I don't support continuing education or supporting our teachers and increasing their needs. You know, they learn new technology. There's a lot that they do in professional development that I completely agree with, and I completely am on board with. My problem is, as soon as we know that community services cannot support this, it's almost a non-starter. I don't know how we can ask our parents to find an avenue or to find a way to watch their kids, especially when we know we have childcare that's already at a premium. So I don't. To me, this is. I would agree with the once a month. But what I would also suggest to Diane and to leadership team is maybe you look at this with an eye toward planning for the next school year. So perhaps we start earlier on with all of the stakeholders at the table. So transportation for buses and community services and everybody that has a stake in this, and get together and see what's going to work and what can be supported and what is just not going to work, and how do you overcome those things that aren't going to work. So I think it's something that potentially in the next school year that you could work toward. But right now, this just isn't, as much as, yes, I agree that maybe this is the time. It's not the time. It's not the time with the challenges that we're facing.
Thanks, Shannon. I think a lot of what you said about, scaffolding this for, future school years was pretty much, where the conversation landed with the policy committee as well. Nick and then Leanne.
Oh, I'm muted. Okay, there we go. I just wanted to thank the policy committee for bringing this back and for making this notable change. As probably people recall, and if you don't recall, you can go back and watch the video. I was pretty vocal and concerned about amplifying the number of early release or late starts next year, given the premium that in-class instruction has and all the work we're doing to go back to school full time. And so, there are many ways to engage in professional development. As an educator myself, I've found many ways to engage in it that aren't exclusive of students in the classroom when I was a teacher. So I just think that what we've learned this year and what we're looking forward to in the fall is more in-person instruction time. And I'm just so glad to see us return to this more modest use of the early dismissals. And I just want to thank you for bringing this forward, and I support it completely.
Thanks, Nick. Go ahead, Leanne.
I know I've been pretty quiet about all of this tonight. Alicia, thank you so much for really giving such a thorough representation of what went through with the very many policy meetings that we had to discuss this. This was probably one of the hardest conversations I think we've ever had in committee. I feel better about having a compromise in here, but I really just wanted to thank you for your leadership in getting us to this point tonight. So thank you for that.
Thanks, Leanne. Are there any other comments or questions about the 21-22 proposed school calendar? Okay, and so with that, I will accept a motion to approve the policy committee's proposal for the that's fiscal year, for the school year 2021-2022 school calendar.
So moved.
Second.
Discussion. Okay, it doesn't look like there's any additional questions or concerns. So Diane, could you please call the vote?
Sure. Mrs. Giftis?
Yes.
Dr. Gill?
Yes.
Ms. Cazelonis?
Yes.
Ms. Layton?
Yes.
Mrs. Lindstrom?
Yes.
Mrs. Seither?
No.
Mrs. Turner?
Yes.
Mr. Bennett?
No.
Ms. Giftis?
Yes.
Great. Thanks, guys. The motion passes. Agenda item 8.2 is a second reading of policy JLCB, which is the immunization of students. So I will pass it back over to you, Alicia.
Just a reminder that this will bring us in compliance with state law. We did amend the language to indicate that this policy will become, the policy changes will become effective September 1st of 2021. And the reason why we're passing it now is so that the nurses can get their work done to notify their families and work with them to make sure that those immunization changes can happen.
Thank you. Do I have a motion to approve policy JLCB as presented?
So moved.
Second.
Discussion? Seeing none, Diane, you can go ahead and call the vote, please.
Mrs. Giftis?
Yes.
Dr. Gill?
Yes.
Ms. Cazelonis?
Yes.
Ms. Layton?
Yes.
Mrs. Lindstrom?
Yes.
Mrs. Seither?
Yes.
Mrs. Turner?
Yes.
Mr. Bennett?
Yes.
And Ms. Giftis?
Yes.
Thank you. Agenda item 8.3 and 8.4 are the meeting minutes of March 4th, 2021, as well as the meeting minutes from March 18th, 2021. I would like a motion to approve both as presented, please.
So moved.
Second.
Is there any discussion? Thank you, Kelly, for preparing those for us. Diane, I think you can call the vote.
Mrs. Giftis,
Yes.
Dr. Gill,
Yes.
Ms. Castellanos,
Yes.
Ms. Layton,
Yes.
Mrs. Lindstrom,
Yes.
Mrs. Seither,
Yes.
Mrs. Turner,
Yes.
Mr. Bennett,
Yes.
and Ms. Giftis.
Yes.
And sorry that my dog was also trying to vote at the same time.
No worries. Agenda item 8.5 is appointments. Agenda item 8.5.1 is the appointments of our Scarborough High School spring coaches. Kelly sent us this material ahead of time, so you should have that in your packet. Do I have a motion to approve as presented?
So moved.
Second.
Is there any discussion? Seeing none, Diane, you can call the vote, please.
Mrs. Giftis,
Yes.
Dr. Gill,
Yes.
Ms. Castellanos,
Yes.
Ms. Layton,
Yes.
Mrs. Lindstrom,
Yes.
Mrs. Seither,
Yes.
Mrs. Turner,
Yes.
Mr. Bennett,
Yes.
and Ms. Giftis.
Yes.
Okay, thank you and congratulations to our coaches, and thank you for your time because we know that that's a tough gig. Agenda item 9.0 is adjournment this evening. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Second.
I have none other than I hope that everyone has a safe and healthy spring vacation, and we look forward to seeing you all when we return.
Great. Mrs. Giftis,
Yes.
Dr. Gill,
Yes.
Ms. Castellanos,
Yes.
Ms. Layton,
Yes.
Mrs. Lindstrom,
Yes.
Mrs. Seither,
Yes.
Mrs. Turner,
Yes.
Mr. Bennett,
Yes.
and Ms. Giftis.
Yes.
Well,
Bye.
Bye, everyone.